So the next will be Daniel Carvalho, and he's a PhD student here at the Center of Archaeology at the University of Lisbon, and also in Barcelona. And his research interests are artificial intelligence and robotics applied to archaeology, and archaeological theory and contemporary archaeology, and how history of archaeology is written by their practitioners. So this sounds also very intriguing. The paper is called The Archaeological Thought in Howard Carter on Manuals, Methods, and Tools in the Excavation of the Tomb of Tutankhamun. So, welcome.
Thank you. I do not see here the PowerPoint. I have a backup if it's needed. Until then, I'm not an Egyptologist. I feel no pressure whatsoever. So, good afternoon to all. I want to thank the committee for the opportunity to present my work in such a place as the Foundation, Gulbenkian Foundation, of paramount importance for Egyptology. My name is Daniel Carvalho. I'm not an Egyptologist. I work within archaeology, and mostly in the theory and history of archaeology. And when I saw the objectives of this colloquium, where one of the main themes was related to the methods of Howard Carter, a chance appeared for studying his discovery in the light of history of archaeology. However, to trace the archaeological thought in Carter, we opted for an approach that is not entirely biographical or concerned with the main elements of the narrative. Instead, we will be focusing on details and fundamentally on archaeological aspects of the excavation itself. This work is an early experimentation that stems from wider research regarding the history of archaeological manuals and their contents, and so this is a preliminary analysis. There are, of course, some guidelines to employ in order to reach the archaeological thought of Howard Carter. As we will focus on his main discovery, we will try to unveil what are the influences that Carter has in terms of methodology. As Carter does not tell us directly and expressly what is the literature that he always uses, we will employ an indirect approach by correlating the contents of manuals and by analyzing the excavation itself. Next, it is important to know what are the tools that are used, as they are abundantly present in manuals of the beginnings of the 20th century, and they are profusely illustrated in them. A main point of this communication is to show the relationship with the workforce as well, as they are the necessary vehicle of the excavation and ultimately the excavators themselves. Finally, and this will be our conclusion, we will question if Carter fits within the archaeological paradigm of research of the early 20th century, or if, on the contrary, he deviates from it. Despite the magnitude of his discovery, it is interesting, almost paradoxical, that Howard Carter does not appear in the major narratives of history of archaeology. In the History of Archaeological Thought by Bruce Trigger, Carter appears in a line of text, and only to demonstrate how archaeology worked in Egypt at the time. On the same registry, in The Discovery of the Past by Alan Schnapp, his presence is merely illustrative, a footnote. Egypt is of paramount importance in these big narratives, however, as it is a main point for argumentation within diffusionism cultural models. What we deduced, at least in the terms of the history of archaeology, is that the discovery engulfed and encompassed all other possible analyses by its sheer importance. And here we see a problem, because the concept of discovery does not have the same impact in archaeology that it once did. In fact, today, A discovery alone, without proper perspection or excavation or methodological inquiries, decreases in value over time if not studied in the light of contemporary scientific terms. The view of some histories of archaeology is of a progressive discipline, and by definition, those who are in the first steps of the development are regarded in a less flattering light. This is as a problem as well as an opportunity. The act of excavation, techniques, and thought of Carter are still shrouded in a state of terra incognita, and so, even if these are initial considerations, it is an exciting exercise. There are possibly countless influences and references that constitute the archaeological thought in Carter. Some will be certainly impossible to reconstruct. Others that are in the literature are so telegraphically mentioned that comprehending them will be a time-consuming task. With that in mind, we focus on two references. The first one, Lord of Carnarvon, is the mentor of Howard Carter. Their excavations are documented, and Carter's discovery and following monographies are dedicated to him. If Howard Carter knows how to excavate and analyze Egyptian antiquities, it is mostly because of him. In this sense, we analyze the manuals that were contemporary to them, and one stood out among them, Methods and Aims in Archaeology, from Flinders Petrie. Why is this manual so important? Because it functions almost as a checklist for the excavation of Howard Carter. Drawing, photographies, and planimetry are made with great detail and attention. Stratigraphy is described, but it is secondary, as the artifact and structures are the main goals for archaeological excavations following Petrie's logic. It is interesting to see that those elements are followed practically to the letter. We can attest this by analyzing the instruments and techniques that are present in the historical record of the excavation. The main element that provides an account for all this is the field diary, as it is the prime instrument for archaeological recording at the time, and it will continue to be so by many decades. This diary, in conjunction with various descriptions, both of the field and of the acts that Carter and his team did as well, have these examples in them. A complete record of everything that was discovered with drawings, numbers, and numbering, and had the conditions of their storage. All the logistics that involved the excavation and discovery, materials, dates, and dislocations. Information about the workforce, tasks that were given, salaries of the workforce. Travels to the site and from the site, visitors that arrived to the excavation. The diary is a reflection, a mirror to the archaeological act. We can see that one of the first entries to Carter's archaeological campaign, where he describes the steps employed in the excavation. The discovery of stone huts was described and interventioned and then drawn and put in the planimetric fashion. It is interesting to see that there is a sense of both scale and height relating to the bedrock, but a more accurate description of stratigraphy ends here. In fact, those stone huts are photographed in the monography made by Carter and Mace, and its information correlates with the diary's entry. We can clearly see the structures that is the target of the excavation and some details of those stratigraphic units. However, they are completely disregarded. The excavation is taken in an almost hexagonal form, and the deposits above the huts are described as natural debris. This could be interpreted as well as soil without artifacts, which is possible and could reinforce the logic behind Carter's thought. However, there is a reinforcement of the idea that the structure here is everything, the main goal, and the deposits and obstacles are needed to be surpassed in order to reach it. Does this mean that Howard Carter did not know how to excavate? No, this is a choice. This is the goal. Another aspect that is present in the diaries are the tools and instruments that are needed to excavate. Here we see tape, metric cloth, and bottles of ink, as well as wood, shears, and nails. Finally, and in a famous photograph we see this, an electric light is deployed when entering the tombs. There are countless other examples of materials that are bought or taken into the excavation. We even have steel gates for the doorways of the tomb, wadding and calico, cardboard boxes, and bandages. The range of the materials is wide and may appear almost chaotic in nature. However, these are the necessary elements for an excavation to take place in that kind of environment at the time. More than that, they are all present in the lists that manuals of archaeology provide to their practitioners. In Petrie, this is evident because all of these materials are employed in Carter's excavation. Picks and baskets are the main elements. It is impossible to excavate without them. Ropes and crowbars are necessary to advance in the tombs. The distinction between the masters and the workforce is profound, and the tools reflect that as well. In Petrie, we have the idea of what an excavation needs to be, a recuperation of antiquities, and the process of making plans and gather topographical information. Carter follows this logic, these tools and these techniques almost as if applying Petrie's teachings on the spot. Here we can see that logic in practice. First, on the right, the enumeration and photography of what is encountered that is made before their storage and in the proper accommodations. However, the left images tell us a great deal about how the archaeological act is in tune with manuals and techniques. Here we see the crowbar, as it can only be used by the master of the excavation, while the workforce help him. Not only the crowbar is an archaeological tool, which by today's standards would be a weird choice, as it is a symbol of status within the excavation. We can see another examples in following manuals. I'm thinking about Mortimer Wheeler when we have a supervisor knife, and only when the supervisor's knife is on the field, the excavation can begin. Crowbar functions in the same logic here. Of course, this shows that a mere tool may have the potential for being an interpretive vehicle to the thoughts of archaeologists, and thus building an history about them is building an history of archaeological thought as well. And of course as well, tools and techniques are dependent on the agents, the practitioners of the excavation. There are multiple functions and a hierarchy to be respected, as viewed before. Of course, there are actions as well that are needed, for example, to guard the site against thieves. The steel gate that was referenced before is one tool to ensure some degree of security. As we can see here, robberies are a commonplace within the excavations. Although this is not an excavation, this excavation of Tutankhamun's, and it is on another tomb, we can see that steel gate, and it's the same mark of the other. It's here applied to this structure. Of course, there is a worker that is relegated to the function of guard. They excavate, carry the debris, the antiquities, guard and assist in every single aspect of the discovery when told so. In the archaeological manuals, the workforce is meant to be local, as they are a cheaper option and have a better understanding of the geography of the site. They are even given certain categories. Here we see what Petrie defines as basket men, workers that sole purpose is to create a chain in order to remove any soil or debris from an area. There are pickmen and spademen as well. Although it is not clear if they are in this image, there certainly are within the excavation. More information will surely arise to further engage with this question. The discovery, of course, was transmitted by telegram to a great deal of people that gathered and visited the excavation. The spirit of travel and visiting archaeological sites and antiquities is a long successor of a Grand Tour sentiment, although in distinct molds. Carter is here both the excavator, the discoverer, and the host, telling the historical and archaeological endeavors to the public, sending telegrams, writing monographies. The transmission of knowledge is a part of the practices, and that is an element that is fundamentally present on the manuals as well, a characteristic that archaeology still retains today. In the end, we surely got more questions than answers, but hopefully this method of analysis can bring forth an historiographical account of the archaeological thought in our Carter. There are factors that offer some future lines of research that will be present in the article. In the first place, the conceptualization of discovery, as it here exudes a power that is both beneficial and prejudicial to the analysis of Carter's discovery. Excavation remained a means to an end, an act of unveiling, without much consideration for the stratigraphy at first, but with a very efficient recording system. Antiquities and structures are the prime goal and objective through the whole excavation. Egypt remains a cultural center and a fundamental zone for cultural historical archaeologists to explore, and that is present in Carter. In the end, we believe that Howard Carter has a place in the history of archaeology as an eclectic archaeologist, in the sense that he follows several procedures by the book, some very distinct but conjoins them in his favor. Although not inserted in the category of archaeologists that excavate with a methodological attention to stratigraphy, Howard Carter follows the most advanced contemporary techniques that are available for that region. We would like to end this presentation with a quote of Mace referring to the discovery. It was certainly a moment of awe and of unparalleled excitement to all involved. As difficult as it is to translate into paper, I believe that this colloquium provides a space to do just that, and hopefully we can all give justice to the historical value of Howard Carter's discovery. Thank you very much.